Tonight we welcome Ben and Alysa Broff, and they're going to be talking to us about resentment. We've been assured that as we talk to Ben and Alysa tonight, we are talking to experts on resentment. We're going to hear some great examples from their lives and marriage where resentment started to take over, and at the same time, they're going to share with us how to overcome and how love has been able to shine through the darkness that resentment brings. So before we start, just before we begin, I want to read a Bible passage. And this one comes from 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 to 6, and then 11 and 12. And it goes like this. You probably know it. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put childish ways behind me. Now we see but a poor reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part. Then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. So welcome, Ben and Alysa. Really good to have you with us again.
Yeah, we always enjoy chatting with you. So thanks so much for agreeing to participate on Family Matters again with us.
Thank you.
So resentment. What an interesting topic.
Yep.
How would you define resentment? Start there.
Me?
Yep.
Okay. So resentment. Well, it's a hard word to define insofar as it's not a word that finds its way commonly in Scripture, and so it's not a concept which you grow up thinking much about or being able to put your finger on very easily. The word resentment means to feel again. It's the action of feeling again, right? So you're probably in a space of resentment when you are feeling something that happened in the past. You're thinking about it. It's already come and gone. The consequences have already been dealt to and addressed, and life is just carried on. But you're thinking back on again, and you're feeling the hurt a second time, a third time, endless numbers of times, and kind of probably promising yourself, "Oh, I'm never going to let that happen to me again." That kind of feeling, right? So
is it a sort of a rehashing of the situation, just keeping on dwelling on it? Is that what it's like?
Yeah, but it's more pernicious, I think, right? Because it's not just rehashing, it's rehashing combined with lying, right? So it's not even so much that I'm thinking about what big old bad old person did to me in the past. I am combining that with the thought of, well, you know what? I bet they did that on purpose. They always do that. I bet this was a conspiracy just to hurt me. But what happens is you almost make whatever happened bigger.
You embellish it, don't you? Yeah.
You have one daughter here. The rest of the kids. Hi. Did you know we're recording this? Oh, you didn't? Okay. It is rehashing in combination with actually making it almost bigger than it was before. Does that make sense, Sharon?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I think adding to it something that may be correct, but very often is not correct, especially when we think that it's being done, especially against us.
Yeah.
As it were.
Yeah. putting motives onto it, creating our mountain out of a molehill
Yeah,
as we rehash it.
that's it.
And
Yeah.
always
way-
about us, yeah.
Yeah, about us. The way Ben's talking about it makes it sound as though it's quite obvious, and actually I think it can be more subtle than that. So yes, the conversation's in my head, but maybe when I'm having conversations with other people, I find that I'm cutting down a certain person or a certain type of person consistently, or a certain maybe I keep feeling a certain way about my husband negatively, or I find I'm reacting irrationally with anger in certain situations. I think those are more subtle ways where I go, actually, there's something going on here where I'm not letting go of something that really doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I know you've both got some examples to share. So yeah, should we take turnabout on that and just sort of hear those examples and how you've worked through them?
Yeah. Okay. So when I think about, I mean, it's good that you went to 1 Corinthians 13 there, because
It's a lovely reading.
the word resentment doesn't show up ever in the AV. So it only shows up a couple times in more modern translations like the RSV.
Yeah.
And
I looked it up in the NIV concordance, and it occurs about 6 times, I think. So yeah, it's very rare.
but what the translation that you used, I think, was the best translation, because the AV has there, it thinketh no evil, love thinketh no evil. The RSV says love does not resent. But the version you use is the best version, because that says love keeps no record of wrongs. And see, that's what resentment is like. Resentment is keeping a record of wrongs, you know?
Right.
And Paul gives us another insight to it, because he says that when I was a child, I reasoned like a child. Well, that's the same word as keeping a record of wrongs. So where you could translate that, when I was a child, I kept records like a child, you know? And so what that really kind of gives us an insight about is that resentment is like childlike reasoning. And the way that I perceive as a parent my child reason, and the way I'm sure that I reasoned as a child, was to keep a record of what other people did against me so that I could get them back. No, so if they hurt me enough, somehow in some twisted logic, it was okay that I hurt them back. Right? That logic seemed to pervade.
An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth.
Yeah, right. If you hurt me, if you hurt me enough, Robert, I can sin against you, but I don't need to seek forgiveness for that because you deserved it.
Yep.
And it's just justice. I've just doled out justice. That's all that was. I've sinned against you, but it's okay because you hurt me first. And the more I can think about how you hurt me, and the bigger I can make your hurt into, you know, if it's a bit, the more I can justify having a negative, awful attitude towards you in response.
Yes.
And so what it does is it allows me to sin against you without needing atonement. And so in that way, it's like false atonement. It's a covering for sin, but it's a covering that doesn't work, right? I've covered my sin and your sin. You know, I mean, think about how now we're talking about something that's quite dangerous, right? Because rather than covering my sin in the righteousness of the Lord Jesus Christ and the righteousness of God, I'm covering my sin in your sin. Right? So
it gets pretty ugly, really.
I'm not seeking forgiveness for that. So that's how, and you know, and the children do that on the basis of it's not fair. right? That's the word that comes out. It's not fair. I'm keeping a record of your wrongs. I'm weighing them up against what I think I deserved, what I had an expectation of deserving, and I didn't get what was my fair due. And I'm keeping a record of that. And now that's a negative in that column, right? So, and although this seems like a childlike reasoning, I carried this attitude into adulthood, let me tell you.
I think we all do, Ben, you're not alone.
The most, there's silly examples and there's big examples. I mean, one big example was I resented Alysa for wanting to move to New Zealand. And so we had our second and third children at the same time as it happened. And then we became pregnant with Petra. And where this little whisper of I may want to return to New Zealand kind of turned into I'm planning to move to New Zealand. And Alysa would have several conversations with me in which she would want to bring this up and engage with me and talk to me about it. And I was afraid to say I didn't want to go back. And I certainly didn't want to tell her that I wanted to go back. So I would give her kind of half non-committal answers.
Yep.
But she took that as enough of a positive to keep planning. And before long, this train was leaving the station, you know? And I recognized that, like, you know, this, I couldn't stand in front of it to stop it or slow it down anymore. And I was angry, right? And I didn't know what to do with that feeling, but I felt hard done by enough that it became a reason that I could treat Alysa badly. I could talk about her behind her back. I could lie to her. I could deceive her. I could hold back from her love and care and affection, right? Because of what she was doing to me, right? And
Alysa, were you aware of this? You know, did you recognize that there was some anger going on and why that was there?
I would say that Ben felt distant. Just as he was sharing, and I was thinking it's interesting because we process resentment differently. His would be more probably fear or guilt based. And so he will tend to retract, whereas I find my resentment manifests more in anger. So for I didn't really, it wasn't until I heard him saying to his parents one day, it's Alyssa's decision that we're moving to New Zealand. And I just looked at him and went, what? It's our decision. It's not mine. It was a combination decision. And that kind of made me see that he was seeing it very differently than how I was seeing it.
Right.
And the reality is there have been several times in our past where we had made some very large decision that was motivated by Alysa wanting to find something different. She wasn't happy where she's at, so we're going to do something really big and really different, you know? And I was feeling the feeling of the past that I had connected to that. So I was feeling again I was thinking to myself, she's not going to find happiness over there. We're not going to move somewhere and she's going to be happy. All she's going to do is uproot me from my family, uproot me from my job, and all these things I know and I'm comfortable with, searching for something she's not going to find. And in the meantime, throwing the whole family into chaos again. So you can see how, like, I was thinking about past stuff, re-feeling that, throwing it on the situation, and then using that as a way, to be okay with actually not giving her what she deserves as a husband. So you can think to yourself, like, this is dangerous, actually, right?
Oh, yeah.
Long enough, you do something stupid. I do something stupid, and I think that happens. So this is a kind of a big example, and for let the record show, right? I'm happy in New Zealand now, right?
Awesome.
and actually, it's been a good decision. But that doesn't mean I didn't. That what I felt at that time is what I'm describing, right?
Yeah.
Even though
Yes.
it turned out well. Yeah.
Sometimes God uses our insanity for good things,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So how did you work through this? How did you work through the resentment? How did you recognize that that's what it was and find processes to work through it?
Well, there's a lot of things I did. I studied resentment. I don't know if you can study it. I looked at the example of Judah, so we can look at that later if we want to, and others to try to understand what's going on. I mean, what kind of resentment do you have to have before you think that selling your brother into slavery is a good idea? You know?
Yeah.
So, and I tried to understand, like, how do you work through this? Ultimately, I needed to get help from others. I couldn't talk about this, and I need to be someone neutral, right? Couldn't be someone in my family. Like, my family would obviously have opinions about me moving to New Zealand,
Yeah.
and Alyssa's family would have opinions too. I need to find someone totally neutral. And resentment and this idea of keeping a record of wrongs or using blame to justify hurt, what I found I had to do was ignore Alyssa's side of this completely. Almost ignore entirely whatever Alyssa brought, whatever chaos was in the past, and whatever, bad or negative feelings I had about that. And I had to look squarely at myself. And what I had to do was, after acknowledging all the things that I think were hurting me, just to ask myself, what did you do? What have you done? So I was able to see that I hadn't been faithful, I hadn't been kind, I hadn't been honest. I was dishonest with her. She would ask me questions and I would give her half truths. I was afraid. I was afraid and dishonest about this whole thing, right? I did not tell her how I felt until a point in time where there's not a lot you should even do about it, right?
Yeah, it's too late.
Yeah, rather than sort of cast blame on her, and she wasn't perfect, by the way, and there was, well, you're pretty cool. No, okay. But I couldn't do anything about what she had done. I had to look at myself and see that I had been afraid, and I had been dishonest, and I had been unkind, and that actually I needed to go do something about those things. I had sinned against her, as it were. The next thing I had to do is, are you still there?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're still here.
Your picture went away, and that's not necessarily a good thing, is it? Okay, There, you're back. All right.
You're all right.
Okay. Yep.
Once I had seen my part, I was really humbled by that. I was able to stop saying that my actions were okay because of what she's done to me.
Okay.
Once I separated her and looked at my actions, I saw that those actions were wrong. The next thing I had to do was see the world from her perspective. Well, how does this feel if you're Alyssa?
Yeah.
Right? How does this feel if you're Alyssa and you've been living in the United States and that you really hadn't formed very close friendships, and you've tried, and your family is all 12,000 kilometers away or whatever it is, and your support network is very way, and you have 3 kids in diapers, and you're pregnant with your 4th.
Yeah.
And although she did love my family, and she does love my family, it's different, having your family around. You can just rely on them in a slightly different way. And how does it feel for her when she's got these 3 kids and 3 babies at home and a baby on the way, and her husband's not being very nice to her, right? How does it feel when how does it feel when she looks around and she says, you know what? I want my kids to grow up in a really big Sunday school, and there was a Sunday school there, but not a really big one, and that's something she wanted because she thought that was important. And she was just thinking about what was maybe best for them. And I thought, well, that doesn't, from her perspective, my behavior doesn't look very good, you know? So
it's really neat that you're able to think that way and to actually process it and look at yourself like that.
Yeah.
It's really hard to do.
So did the help that you get, did they help you process it through like this and encourage you to see it that way?
Yeah, I had to do a process, and in that process, these things were, I had to write them one step at a time. So you don't have to do it all at once, you know. First thing was to write down everything Alysa did that I didn't like. Well, that was easy, you know.
Because that's what you've been thinking about. Yeah.
Second step was to kind of think about, well, why did that affect me? You know, what insecurities were being touched on, and and to see that I was sort of putting my insecurity on her, right? Well, she can't bear that. She has to bear her own insecurities, let alone bear my insecurities, you know. And the fourth step was to see, what did I do? And the fifth step is, how did she feel? And the sixth was to go to her and to acknowledge my part, and to try to make that right as best I can.
This is really big, and it takes a huge amount of humility to be able to work through all this. And it also requires the person to step back and to relinquish self-pity and the right to feel sorry for yourself. And to acknowledge and accept the part that that you're playing in it yourself. It's really big.
I think that's huge.
Yeah.
Resentment is a very proud feeling. So if the antidote's not humility, what's the antidote going to be? It's got to be a practical form of humility. I'll tell you, in Judah's case, Judah in the Bible, his humility came when Tamar presented him his staff and his signet and said, "I'm pregnant by the man who owns these." And he said, "She's been more righteous than I." And you just puzzle over that. Like, well, she kind of played the harlot. She had hardly been righteous. But in reality, she had the consequence of maybe being burned, certainly being killed. And at that point in time, any person would just say, well, I'm pregnant by Judah, and implicate him and blame him and throw his name into the mud. And she didn't do that, right? She didn't do that. And so when she said, I'm pregnant by the man who owns these, right? And she hadn't implicated him. So she had shown him honor, even when he had dishonored her by depriving her of all her economic security. I think he was able to suddenly see her perspective. She had no husband. She had no economic security. She would have gone back into her family home, and they didn't want her anymore because she was a liability. She had been given a name as if like it was her fault that God struck down her husbands, who were wicked men, and Judah would have known they were wicked men, and they had been trying to deprive her from a son, which was a form of her security. So all her insecurities were exposed, and yet she didn't implicate Judah. So that was a deeply humbling thing for Judah. Suddenly he could see her perspective, and he went, she's more righteous than I. That's how you know that he saw her perspective, because he said she's been more righteous than me, right? So he could see that, and so then he did what was right. So if you don't actually find yourself able to see it from someone else's perspective, and not that you're, by the way, in that process, I never made Alyssa's actions, about the chaos that she brought into my perception of the chaos that was brought into my life. I never said like, oh, gee, that was all right, and she was a very healthy person when she did that. And and Alyssa would say the same, that she's like, well, I was struggling, and that I put a lot on Ben, so I didn't have to go make her actions right, but I did have to own mine and see her perspective. It broke it. And
So when you say it broke it, does that mean the feeling of resentment just melted away?
It did, because what happens is when I go to Alysa and I make my actions, I try to seek some form of forgiveness for my actions. Then I was able to find that forgiving her of hers was a very simple task, because, you know, in some respects, I was holding on to all of her wrongs as a way of providing cover or atonement or justification for my wrongs. Like, I needed her wrongs to balance out my wrongs.
Mm.
But once I had tried to make my wrongs do something about my wrongs, ignoring her completely, well, then I no longer need to hold on to hers, because I'm not justifying mine anymore. I've acknowledged mine.
Yeah.
And I've dealt with mine, so I can let hers go, right? Because I don't need them. I don't need them anymore. Now, it helped me a lot that Alysa was in a lot of ways changing. So there's forward progress and all the things I was upset about anyway, right? So if you're in the process of being constantly re-hurt, right, then maybe that would have been tougher, and I would have maybe be able to put away mine, but I would have had to distance myself from her. And that would have been a healthy thing to do. I'm not trying to say that you should just continuously put yourself in a position to be harmed.
Right.
But at the same time, if I didn't put away my stuff, right, then that anger wouldn't have gone anywhere. I wouldn't have been able to remove it.
So how long did that take you to work through?
It took me, when she left for New Zealand, I started, right, more or less, at least in earnest. And I'd say it was resolved within 12 to 18 months, right?
Okay,
so
it's a reasonably long process that it's taken for you to work through that.
Many conversations, not with Alysa, with the person trying to help me through this. Many conversations, and there's setbacks along the way, because as soon as Alysa does something that makes me feel that old feeling again, it feels like you might get right back to where you started. You're not, but you kind of feel that old feeling.
It all comes back.
Yeah.
I think resentment is a form of meditation, and because we have a resentment about a lot, it's like a muscle that we practice. So even though maybe you can start seeing what you've done, or you're developing empathy for the other person, that muscle still has to die, and you have to practice the alternative muscle, which is actually, how do I love and care for this person? How do I trust God in replacement of the old thinking that I had?
Yeah. Now, Alysa, you had a really good example of resentment as well. Do you want to share that with us?
Yeah. So I too have had resentments towards Ben, but I really wanted to share something which I think is often happens with us sisters. So as a woman, we have a really deep, innate craving that God has put inside us to be loved and appreciated, and to be beautiful, and to be cared for and adored by people in our life. And when we are in a relationship where that's not happening, I think it's very easy for us as women to compare ourselves to others. And when we feel like we feel short, or we're unloved, or we're unwanted, or uncared for, we develop these feelings of hurt and resentment. And so I wanted to share one about a situation which happened probably over 15 years ago. It's with someone that no one in New Zealand, I think, really knows. So it was a situation where I was depending on someone a lot for companionship and support. And so I was sharing with them personal information about what was happening in our marriage. And in a conversation with this person one day, they happened to slip that they had shared with someone else something I had shared with them. And I felt very, very hurt by that because it was personal. Yeah. I assumed that they would know that that was confidential information. And all of a sudden, all these walls of trust and confidence in another person and what I see now as my esteem kind of plummeted because I felt like I wasn't being loved and cared for. And what happens in ecclesial life is we tend to see these people often. And so, you know, I was seeing this person again and again and again, and every time I saw them, this hurt is being rehashed because they kind of continued on with life as though nothing had happened. And on the inside, I'm like burning up with a really deep sense of betrayal and sadness.
Can I just ask, Alysa, did you express your hurt to the person at the time and you know, say I feel disappointed that you shared this information? Did you say anything about it, or did you just keep this all inside you?
I think I might have said something like, oh, how come they know? And I think as they shared it, they realized that they had done something wrong. And that was about of communication about the situation when you kind of just went on pretending as though nothing had happened. And I think at that point I stopped communicating. Like I would actively call this person, and about that time I stopped actively reaching out to them.
Okay, so they would have known that they had hurt you, and yeah, was there any sort of communication around that at the time, or was it sort of the elephant in the room that didn't really get talked about?
It was definitely the elephant in the room. Yeah.
Okay.
If that person had come back and immediately said, I'm really sorry, I should never have done that, that may have felt different. I don't know, because it didn't happen. I suspect it wouldn't have changed a lot, because I can now see that the reason for my hurt was not really about that situation. It was about much deeper feelings of feeling like I am someone who is unlovable, and you know, I think I have very deep childhood fears of not being able to be loved, and that situation just happened to bring that out.
Right. Yeah. So how did you work through this?
A similar way to Ben, I needed help actually, that's not true. I have needed help with other resentments. This particular resentment, it was enough to get distance from that person and not to be seeing them regularly. And what actually happened gradually over time, that situation has healed. But I have experienced other resentments which are very similar in nature to that one. And maybe I'll just pop in here. I feel like the resentments I've experienced are a real gift, because they've forced me to look at things inside of me where I am separated from God. It's not about the other person. You know, that deep sense of feeling unloved is a deep sense of feeling that I'm not loved by God. And so these resentments have brought me to a place where I really have to face that and begin developing a trust that my God does love me. And once that foundation is in place, then these other hurts are not so quick in coming. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you've got a resentment inventory. Do you want to talk us through that?
Yeah, I can. I just left it in the other room. Do you mind if I grab it?
Sure. Yeah.
We can just make small talk.
We could do, yeah.
I'm only on the list 100 times. That's all. Oh, you're back.
I'm back.
Oh,
that was great. That was very small talk.
Yeah.
The word that used to go over in my head in terms of my resentment towards Ben was actually the word despise. I felt like there were times where I really despised him. I feel like I can talk freely in Ben's presence about that today because it's different today. But I guess I bring that up because resentment is not the word that often comes to our head when we're in resentment. There's other words like I can't stand you, or I despise you, or I'm sick of you, or every time I'm around you, you make me feel.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think when we start to use those words like you just used, like every time, or you always, or you never, I think that's where we can start to, I suppose those are really warning lights to say resentment, you know.
Yeah,
They're building something up, making
Yeah.
something more of this, you know, making it into a mountain where it might have been a molehill kind of thing. Yeah. Adding all the past resentments in and turning it into something massive.
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Okay.
tell us about the inventory.
Yeah, so this resentment inventory, I just want to share because it's not my work. The best source that I have found for dealing with resentment comes from the book Alcoholics Anonymous.
Okay.
It's a blue book that's available in libraries, and it just has a really good way of kind of talking through how to deal with resentment.
Yes. Can I just ask this question? To work through this inventory, do you have to talk to the person themselves about what the issues are, or can you work through this inventory and actually get some sort of peace within yourself without necessarily having to hash it out with the other person?
Yeah.
Depends.
It does depend. I think probably often, Sharon, you can work through it on your own and come to peace with your God. The key to answering that question is, am I going to create more hurt by bringing this up with the other person? Because if I'm going to create more hurt and harm, then it's actually not worth the conversation. It's something that I need to allow time to heal. If there's hurt that I have caused, then first of all, I need to understand what I've done and to have a really good understanding of the hurt and what my insecurities are. Because then when I go to the other person, I'm not going to be blaming. I'm actually going to be staying on my side of the street and just going and saying, I'm really sorry for what I've done. Then if they want to come back to me and say, do you know what, I'm really sorry for the hurt I've done too, that's lovely. But they may not do that. They may not see that they've been hurtful. At which point I actually just need to let that go. And I would say choose to live in forgiveness, which is an action, not a feeling.
Yeah.
Anyway, share with us your inventory there. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is based on page 64 to 68 of the Alcoholics Anonymous book. So the first thing I do if I have a resentment that's really sticky and I just can't seem to budge it is I pray. So I write a prayer at the top of the sheet, which will be along the lines of, my Father, please help me to see the truth. So I've got here, please help me to see the truth about this resentment, to put away blame, to have a heart prepared to choose forgiveness, and to trust in your character. So I want God's help as I work through this. And what I'll do in the first column is I'll write down the name of the person who helped me. So Ben's already talked about this tonight. The name of the person who hurt me. In the second column, I'll list out my case. So everything that they've done to hurt me and kind of pour all that poison out onto the page. I've done that. I'm ready for the next column, which is to see what parts of me are affected. So for me, I'm going to name the person here as Sally. It's just a random name I've put down, even though this is a real resentment. Column 2, she shared private information with others about my marriage. So that's the specific hurt that I'm repeating in my head. Column 3, what parts of me are affected? So first of all, I look at my self-esteem, which is sentences that start with I am. So for me, it was I'm not good enough, I'm not liked, I'm not lovable. Great, thank you. The next I looked at was security. So what are the things that I believe, this might be real or perceived, what are the things I believe I need to be okay? So in that relationship, I was believing that I need Sally to like me to be okay. I believed I needed the intimacy of Sally's friendship to feel okay about myself. I feel like I needed to be loved, cared for by Sally for me to feel okay. So those are all indications that I was believing, if only I had Sally's approval, then I'll be Next part, what are my ambitions? So what do I actually want in this world to be okay? I want my friendships to be two-way, for others to like me and treat me in the way I would treat them. I want to be seen as thoughtful, as a thoughtful and kind friend. And I want to be treated as precious by my friends. In the next part I looked at is personal relations. So the Alcoholics Anonymous book kind of breaks these little things down for us. Personal relations, which is how others should see me or treat me. And I believe others should see me or treat me as a valuable friend, and that the information I share with them is confidential. Now, once I've done all that, and I've seen why I'm affected by this resentment, or what parts of me are, then I'm ready to move on to the next part. And at that top of the page there, it's important before I move on to column 4 that I ask a couple of questions. So am I willing to accept that everyone in this world, including me, struggles with sin? So these questions are preparing me to say, can I truly set aside all the hurt I believe they've caused me? Because now I'm about to just look at me and exclude anything I think they've done to hurt me. Acknowledging that Sally may have wronged me and that I'm continuing to hurt myself by holding on to that wrong, and that this is keeping me separated from God and others. Am I ready to now start looking at myself?
Right.
And then that third question there that Ben alluded to earlier, what would have to be happening in my life for me to treat them in that way? So that's kind of like, I'm trying to put myself in Sally's shoes, saying, why the heck would she do that to me? What's going on in her life that would cause her to do that to one of her friends? And that's a good question for trying to develop a little bit of empathy for their experience in life, I guess. Okay. So if I'm ready to set aside the hurt that I think they might have caused me, I'm ready to look at column 4, which is disregarding the other person entirely. Where am I at fault?
Okay. So this is what Ben was earlier as well, which is good. Yep.
Where am I being selfish or self-centered? I can find that by asking the questions, what am I trying to get and what am I trying to keep? So I've been trying to get Sally's approval. I've been trying to keep her friendship. And actually, I want Sally to act the way I want her to act. I have this perception of how the world should run, and she's jolly well not playing her part in my world.
Yeah.
So where am I being dishonest in my thinking or actions? And for me, this is always the biggest chunk. First of all, I'm believing I need Sally's approval to feel okay about myself. That is not true. I need God's approval, and I've been putting Sally in the place of God. Secondly, I think Sally should behave the way I want her to. So I'm playing God by wanting her to play the part that I've decided she needs to play in my life. I'm forgetting that I'm God's daughter and I'm loved by him regardless of how other people treat me. And focusing on how she's not loving me, I'm actually minimizing the way that many other people show love and care towards me. And I'm placing this unnecessary responsibility on Sally to make me feel secure and wanted. There are all these other people in my life who show me love, and yet I'm going to focus on what she's done and information about me.
That's quite a dangerous thing, really. And I know I've done that where one person at work will upset me, but I'll forget about how everyone else is nice to me, but I'll concentrate on how that one person has really made me feel yuck. The black spot, yeah.
Okay,
sorry, carry on. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I have an expectation about how others should treat me. I think we said the other night, an expectation is often a pre-planned resentment. So the only person I can control in my life is myself. I can control how I treat others. I can't choose or control how other people treat me. I'm dishonest and feeling like because I've shared so much with her, we should still be close friends. But the truth is I can be kind and loving towards Sally, but I don't actually need to trust her with intimate friendship. And also this, when I was writing this out the other night, just trying to dredge up this old resentment again, just for your sake of sharing it, I saw, which I haven't seen before, that I was making an assumption that she would know to keep that piece of information confidential, but I had not specifically said that to her. And I'm actually careful about doing that now with people, where I'll say to them, by the way, this is something I would rather you didn't share with others. So I chose to share that information with her and didn't actually ask her to keep it private.
Right.
And in last point, all of a sudden, I'm like, that's my problem. That's not her problem. That is 100% my problem.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the last section in column 4 is fear. What are the things I'm afraid of? And this tends to go quite deep. So deep down inside, I'm afraid of losing people's approval. I'm afraid of losing her friendship. I'm afraid of the judgment of others who now know the information I shared in private. I'm afraid of trusting people and opening up to them. And I'm afraid of not having control of information about myself and where it goes. I popped a fear inventory on here as well, because I find this the most helpful, because you can see this lovely golden column at the end, which is where I really want to get to, and where I can finally start living in love instead of resentment. So first column again, fear. What is my fear? I just picked one of those fears. The one I picked was not having control of information about myself.
Yep.
And I asked myself, why do I have this fear? So it's just a if and then. So for me, if I don't have control over information about myself, then others might hear correct information. So what? Well, then they might judge me. So what? Then I won't be liked. It's a big deal. Well, then people won't want to spend time with me. Then I'll feel despised and lonely and rejected by other people. Then that will hurt a lot. Then I won't be able to hear it because I don't like feeling emotional pain. Then I'll feel like there's no point in living. I just want to die. And I find for me, in all my fear resentments, at the bottom of all my fears is either death or rejection from God. Those would be my two deepest fears in the end, whenever I work through this kind of column.
Right.
Okay.
Third column of the fear inventory. What are all the things I do to try and control the fear? So some of my examples in this scenario were, don't get too close to people, don't share private information. If friends get too close, distance yourself from them. Don't ever speak negatively of other people for fear they might do it to you. Protect yourself from emotional pain at all costs. So that's kind of the thinking that I start using to respond to these deep fears and insecurities that I have. Then I have to ask myself, have these actions, these ways I behave, have they changed the fear? No, they haven't. The fear is still there. Okay, so that shows me that all these things I do, these things I do to rely on myself, they haven't worked. Self-reliance has failed me. What do I have left? What I have left is trusting in God. So this is the golden column, and I love it. God reliance. So if I truly believed that there was a God running the world, then how would I think in relation to this fear? So when I sit in the spirit and I say to God, this is often a prayer, and I sit quietly and I'll meditate on it. God, if you're truly running the world, even though I felt this fear, how would I behave? And this is how I would behave. I would allow God to bring people in and out of my life on his terms and in his timing. I would truly believe that I'm God's daughter, that I'm loved by him, and that he is my refuge and my shelter. that I have nothing to fear from the thoughts and opinions of others, that God's opinion of me alone is what matters, and that I don't need to be afraid of emotional pain because it's a tool that God uses for my growth. And so I trust him to guide me through this. Now, when I write all those down on paper, these are now a set of instructions for how I need to go forward from this place and behave.
Yeah.
Okay, so the golden column is God's truth. My job now is to go out and behave as though I'm living in that golden column.
That's great.
It's easier said than done, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. That's a really, really useful tool, and a really good thing, I think, to be able to pull out and really. It means we have to think deep about ourselves, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's something I like, total honesty. First, honesty in being able to see that you do feel resentment, you know, and secondly, in being able to go, well, how have I caused some of that, or what's been my part to play in it, and how can I resolve that in a loving way? How can I keep no record of wrongs?
Yeah, the illusion that we keep telling ourselves is, if someone else is different, then I'd be happy.
Yeah.
If someone else was different, then I'd be happy. And I don't know how good you are, Robert, you are, Sharon, at making other people different to secure your happiness, but we're rubbish at it, you know?
Doesn't usually work.
It doesn't work, yeah.
And so what this process does is it allows you to instead look at just two things. Look at yourself, which you can actually do something about, can't you? And then look at where God was or wasn't in this entire exchange. And by doing that, you can invoke the greatest power in the universe, which is God. And you can actually do things which you have some ability to I don't want to say control, but you can do something about it. You can change, because I just simply can't change what others do or think or feel, you know, but God can, but I can't, right? So, but we go on with the illusion so often, so much. You need to be different. You need to be different so that I feel better, you know, which is honestly, like, you couldn't get more playground than that, could you? Right? You know. But yet we kind of hold that on, and we progress in our ecclesial world, in our family life, in our work relationships on that basis, right?
It's a lie that we all want to believe.
Yeah.
They're all wrong, I'm right.
If everyone was more like me, the world would be a perfect place.
And if you're right, there's one thing that for sure happens when you're right, is you don't gotta do nothing. Right? Because you're right. You don't have to. It was a very convenient point of view, right? Whereas the approach that Alysa outlined, you don't get to sit in a convenient point of view, right? You don't get to sit with that confidence that you are a victim and that other people need to change and that you are righteous in all your actions and decisions and perspectives. And therefore, because you're not right, there's something that you can do to reconcile with God and with others. And, you know, it is an answer to resentment. It is, if people want it, but it's not easy. And I would say that in both of our cases, without people helping us go through this and see it, like I would never have been able just to pick up the sheet and go, yeah, I'm going to do this, right? I mean, that's,
well, first of all, the hurt gets bad enough that you can't stand it anymore, so you have to do something. That's she?
But going it
So
alone.
what I'm hearing from that is that would be invaluable to each of us when we're dealing with things that are hurtful and that are causing a rift between us and somebody else, that it would be helpful to get somebody else on board, a neutral party that can help us work through the process of seeing our part in it.
Yep.
But sometimes actually putting it down on paper is enough though, even without a third party. Like if you were to start writing it down on paper to try and set aside what they've done and to see your part, that may be enough.
Yeah.
I think by the time Ben and I got to this, we were so sick with resentments that we really needed him.
Yeah.
Maybe if I could just pop in here, the biggest problem with resentment, whether we know it or not, is that it separates us from God.
Yeah.
And so it's
Absolutely.
not afford to just sit on. I think we do actually need to work on trying to heal them. Yeah,
Totally. This is amazing stuff, and I think it's subject that we don't think about or talk about near enough. And it's really helpful. So we really appreciate your sharing this with us tonight and being vulnerable enough to share your own experiences with it, and how you found healing and ways forward to work process through these situations. So thank you both so very much.